change over to watering for just a second, just to kind of segue into some of the topics that, with summer and all that, what's going on. Last week I talked about evapotranspiration, and I didn't really talk about it as detailed as I probably should have. I probably wasn't as prepared to talk about it as I thought I was. I thought it was something really important. I wanted to get the information out there. But watering cool season grasses in the summer, it's really important. And if you're trying to maintain putting down 2.5 inches, you got your little measuring cup out there. Like, I have a rain gauge in my yard. I do measure out to see how much water I'm putting down. I water a lot differently during different times of the year, and depending upon whether I have seed going or I don't have seed going. Like, I have all different kinds of areas in my yard right now that I've got seed growing. And so my watering schedule is a little weird, but I changed the times on the different zones so that, maybe an area that gets really, good water coverage, I've got it running less. And technically I'm putting down the same amount I would if I just did one watering every other day. But I'm just kind of spreading it out over a couple of times a day and still applying the same amount of water. And I'm trying to monitor the areas of my yard, because coverage, and that's why I have my sprinkler video up. Coverage is really important. I have really good coverage in my sprinkler system. I only had 2 circuits before I put my Kentucky bluegrass and my putting green in, and I really felt that I wanted better coverage, so I added a 3rd circuit, and I've got overkill. But I would rather have more coverage and water less than less coverage and have to water more. And I'm using Rainbirds, which these things work really good. I've seen sprinklers, there's all different types and the way they spray and their spray pattern, and I've seen people talking about their spray pattern and how they have to run their sprinklers for 45 minutes just to get a 1/2 inch of water down. And it all comes down to this type of sprinkler that you're putting in, the type of sprinkler you're using if you don't have an in-ground system. And I've gone away from all those rotary sprinklers and all the different spray heads and everything like that, and I've stuck with Rainbirds. Rainbirds by far cover more distance, and they just have a better spray pattern. And because they cover more distance, I use less of them. I don't have any more than 3 in one circuit. My water runs at 6 gallons per minute. I think it's 80 PSI or 75 PSI. I forget which. And I'm using Rainbirds that cover up to 45 feet, I believe it is. It's 40 or 45. And I adjust them. They have an adjusting point on them, and you can adjust the pattern and all that. And I just adjust them to cover as good as possible. And you can see in the video here of my sprinklers, they overlap pretty well. I've got the 2 on the side there. They each cover back to where the sprinkler head is, that's next to them. And then I don't have this one running, but right down here, there's another sprinkler head. I can't, anyways, this right, there it is right there. There's the Rainbird. So this is in my 2nd circuit, and this kind of covers back over the putting green, but it also gives a redundancy over the rest of my yard. There, it pops on right there. And it just goes in a full circle. It just constantly goes around a circle, round. And then I have 2 more, one back here, and then one over here in the bottom corners down there by the sidewalk. And those are basically covering each other with a redundancy, and then they're also covering up to where this Rainbird is right here. But the other sprinklers in the other circuit were also covering where that center Rainbird is right down here. So water coverage, just really important. The types of sprinkler you're using are really important. These sprinkler heads, I believe, are like $16. I use Rainbirds. I feel Rainbirds are the best. Any sprinkler, you could probably run into problems with them, with their patterns. They get gunked up, they get stuck. I mean, I've had that problem with these. And if you don't have the right water pressure and you have too much sprinkler heads on that circuit, your sprinklers aren't going to work properly. So I've come down to 3 rain birds per circuit, 6 gallons per minute at 80 psi is where I'm at. If I do any more than that, I start running into problems where there's not enough pressure to make the rain bird go round, and then it has a little thing that comes down on it that just hits a stop point and stops it and sends it back the other way. They're very simple, and it's also got a little adjuster on it to adjust the spray pattern, the distance and all that sort of stuff. So to me, rainbirds are the way to go. I really like it. I like the coverage. And this is probably the biggest problem that a lot of homeowners have, is how their sprinklers are covering their yard. To me, it's just really important. Overkill is better than not enough, because if you don't have enough, you're going to have spots in your yard. Just like my neighbor Wilson, I've talked about, he's just got a spot in his yard. He knows it. He understands it. I think we're going to fix that later on and kind of help him out and get a little bit better coverage. But, when you're putting a sprinkler system in, you've got to think about the coverage and how well it's covering. So that brings me back to the evapotranspiration. So I'm just going to bring this back up just for a quick second, because I did want to add a couple things that I didn't really put out. Because, evapotranspiration, it's not just evaporation. It's also transpiration, which is like the plant sweating out water. I mean, sweating's probably a really bad term to use, but, it's the best way to say, have it as evapotranspiration, is because it takes into account not only how much evaporation you're going to get out of your soil, but how much water the plant loses its water content. It basically sweating or it evaporating out of the plant. Anyways, that's why I showed this map here of evapotranspiration and how you can find it for your area. I mean, look at all these areas here. Look at, and then down here, 0.27 down in Idaho. Some are big, some are small, but this is also, I have this set on the daily. So right now in Seattle, I live down more by Tacoma, but it's at 0.19 for today. So it's not that much. I mean, we went from really hot temperatures last week, because when I showed it to you last week, it was at like a 1.46. Because we had some really hot temperatures, and then all of a sudden, what was it, Thursday? The temperatures dropped. We're back to overcast. June is a very weird month for us, and that's why understanding and knowing information like this is really going to help you, because, later last week and into the first part of this week, it was hot. Your lawn needed, water. This week, I mean, I've actually dialed my sprinklers back. I don't even have them running right now, just because the temperatures dropped so cold. It's been overcast and all that sort of stuff. So another thing I wanted to point out here is it's really great to have a weather station, because a weather station at your house is going to help you understand, how much rain you're getting, the winds, all those things factor into how your ground is holding moisture. If it's really windy, the wind is going to dry that ground out, and you're going to lose some moisture out of it. I know when I had done a seeding project, I didn't water right away because I was doing some work in some other areas in my yard, and it was really windy that day, and the seed was literally getting blown out of the area that I had just seeded, because the wind and the peat moss and everything that I put down started drying out very, very fast. So a weather station at your house, something that you can look at, if you're in an area where you get thunderstorms and that sort of thing, maybe a thunderstorm is going to come through, but you got your water on. If you have an app on your phone that you can turn your water off, that's great, because then you can go in, you can turn it off, and you can say, oh man, a thunderstorm that I didn't even know was coming today just came and dumped a half an inch or an inch of rain on my lawn. So a weather station is really nice. I have one. It gives lots of information about the weather, also other things that you could be interested in, sunrise, sunset, moon, all those sorts of things. the radiation levels. There's just all kinds of monitors you can get on a weather station. And mine is out on my fence over here. You might have seen it on some of my drone video. And I really like it. I like following weather. We get a lot of rain here, so I like to know how much rain we're getting. And it just helps me out, especially with my sprinklers. If we're getting a lot of rain, I know how to run my sprinklers, when to run my sprinklers, and all that sort of thing. So, watering, sprinklers, weather, evapotranspiration, it's all really, really important into helping your lawn stay healthy and green, especially during the summer months, because the summer is really tough, especially here in Western Washington where I am. Because like I said, I think it's going to rain next week a couple of days. It's supposed to be cooler. When I talk to cooler, we're highs in the 60s right now, lows still back in the 40s. Lots of overcast. That's just the way it is here in Western Washington. We don't really get summer until July 4th. We get a lot of false starts to summer because we've been in the 80s and high 80s and stuff like that already this year, but only a couple of times, and for maybe 3 days at a time, and then all of a sudden the temperatures drop back down to 60 degrees or the high 50s. Just not uncommon here. So understanding the weather in your area is just very important, and how it's going to work out for you. So that's just kind of a recommendation for you.